Chevrolet started a massive advertising campaign in 1970, focusing on its history from 1911 to the present. Customers were greeted with a General Motors brochure titled The Chevrolet Story, 1911 to 1970. Well, the Chevrolet chronology is now part of our automotive history. William Billy Durant, one of the founders of General Motors in 1908, and Swiss race car driver and engineer Louis Chevrolet were two of the early pioneers who developed Chevrolet. Chevrolet is one of the most popular and easily identifiable car brands in the United States, yet it's surprising how few North Pole area drivers are familiar with the company's history. This video will go into detail about the history and logo of the Chevrolet car brand. But let's begin with a little background story. On Christmas Day 1878, in the Swiss village of La Chaux-de-Fonds in the Jura Highlands, a boy was born who would forever revolutionize the world of the automobile. Louis Chevrolet was his name. The Chevrolets relocated to Beaune, France, with their 5 children, Alfred, Louis, Fanny, Bertha, and Arthur, at the end of 1887, when Louis was just 9 years old. Gaston, the 7th child, arrived in 1892, following Marthe, the 3rd daughter. While his father, Joseph, worked as a clockmaker, Louis chose to become a mechanic. He got work with the Roblin Haulage Company, which also repaired carriages and bicycles. According to legend, Louis Chevrolet was summoned from his workshop in the spring of 1896 or 1897 to repair the car of a guest staying at the Hôtel de la Poste. Vanderbilt, an American multimillionaire, owned the vehicle that sparked such excitement at the time. That must have been the point at which Louis Chevrolet fell in love twice, once with the vehicle and again with the thought of immigrating to America. Louis Chevrolet acquired another love in Beaune, racing. Around that time, the teenager won several of his first cycle races in the hills behind Beaune. It was his Gladiator cycle that prompted him to travel to Paris in early 1899. He was assigned to the workshop of car manufacturer Durant, who also made Gladiator bicycles at the time, where he learned everything he could about the combustion engine. He is also reported to have collaborated with de Dion-Bouton, Hotchkiss, and Moores. But one thing was certain: Louis had succumbed to the automobile virus. He used the money he made in Paris to fund his journey to the American continent, which began in Canada. He worked as a driver and mechanic, which was the same thing at the time, in Montreal before moving to New York a few months later, this time with some money in his pocket. Along the way, young Chevy recorded a couple of achievements but also encountered some difficulties. Let's go through the major ones. He began his career in New York by working in an engineering workshop owned by William Walter, a fellow Swiss from Biel who had emigrated to Brooklyn. Louis joined the American branch of de Dion-Bouton in 1901. When he joined his first race in 1905, he made headlines. He drove his Fiat in magnificent style, winning the 3 miles on his first attempt and setting a new 1-mile speed record. His top speed was 109.7 km per hour. The achievement catapulted him to celebrity overnight, and the following year, he shaved another second off his own world mile record. He also beat the world record for a 68-mile run. In 1906, he collaborated with Walter Christie on the development of a new racing automobile with front-wheel drive and a Durant V8 engine. As a result, a new world record of 191.5 km per hour was set. However, the name Chevrolet was destined to become even more well-known. In the years that followed, Arthur and Gaston followed their now famous brother into the world of motor racing, resulting in 3 Chevrolets on the starting grid for races. In most cases, however, Louis was the hero, and the Americans dubbed him the Daredevil Frenchman. Louis competed in many races over the next few years, driving a Buick, a Cornelian, and, above all, a Frontenac he constructed himself. Gaston and Louis competed in the Indianapolis 500 in 1916, each in a Frontenac, but neither finished. After the First World War, the great races resumed in 1919. Despite some significant accidents in Indianapolis, the Chevrolets finished far up the field, with Louis finishing 7th and Gaston 9th. 1 year later, 7 Frontenacs, 4 of them under the name Monroe, qualified for Indianapolis, but the race turned out to be a dramatic experience. Louis Chevrolet, always eager to use the most recent materials, chose at the last minute to add some track rods made of vanadium. Unfortunately, the vanadium had not been adequately hardened. As a result, one automobile after another had to pull out. Gaston Chevrolet was the only person to finish the famous race. He won by going an average of 141 km per hour. The boys' racing careers, though, took their toll. Louis Chevrolet spent 3 years in the hospital after a series of mishaps between 1905 and 1920. His brother Gaston was killed during racing in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, on November 25, 1920. Louis Chevrolet never competed in another race after that. But what were the events that led to Chevrolet's creation? Let's find out. Louis Chevrolet and William C. Durant, the founder of General Motors, crossed paths multiple times through his engagement with Buick as a racing driver. On November 3, 1911, Billy Durant noticed Louis Chevrolet's great abilities and joined forces with him to form the Chevrolet Motor Car Company. The first Classic 6 models departed the Detroit factory in early 1912. Louis Chevrolet had always aimed to make high-quality automobiles, but Durant noticed the people's car trend early on. His goal was to make cars as cheaply as possible. Because neither of the two protagonists would budge, Louis Chevrolet threw in the towel and quit his own firm in 1913. He did, however, leave his name behind. The worst failure of William Durant resulted in the development of Chevrolet. A year after founding General Motors, he set his sights on Henry Ford's third and most successful automobile firm. Lawrence R. Guston's biography of Durant says that Ford was worried about Selden's patent suit, which said that Selden invented the car, and was willing to sell it to GM in exchange for the rights to motorized farm tools. GM agreed to pay Ford $2 million in cash plus $4 million in interest over 3 years. Guston states in Billy Durant, creator of General Motors, that on October 26, 1909, GM's board granted Durant power to purchase Ford if funding could be arranged. Banks were wary of the fledgling, fly-by-night auto sector and rejected Durant's request for a $2 million down payment loan. During a financial crisis in 1910, GM's board of directors fired Durant and allowed bankers to take over his company. Durant began working on his comeback in early 1911, when he established his own Detroit shop with retired Buick racer Louis Chevrolet. Durant went to Flint, Michigan, where he had founded GM in the early 1900s, and purchased the bankrupt Flint Wagon Works assets. He then asked Arthur C. Mason, who used to make engines for Buick, to help him start a new business, while Durant set up the Little Motor Car Company. On November 3, 1911, Durant established the Chevrolet Motor Company. Although Louis Chevrolet was not an executive, he experimented with huge luxury automobiles while Chevrolet Motor Company's little brand marketed lower-priced cars to compete with Ford. The enormous $2,500 Classic 6 of 1912 was the first production Chevrolet, but the first Chevys as we know them were the 1914 Royal Mail Roadster, $750, and Baby Grand Touring Car, $875, $1475. Louis Chevrolet resigned from his name brand firm to return to racing. Durant's 1916 Chevrolet 490, $490, was a direct competitor to the Ford Model T. Chevy was booming by this point, with plants in cities like Flint and New York City. Its success provided Durant with the means to purchase GM stock with the assistance of the DuPont family and a New York bank president, Louis J. Kaufman. On September 16, 1915, GM's 7th anniversary, Durant led a revolution and took back control of the company. According to Guston, on December 23, 1915, Chevrolet stockholders boosted their capitalization from $20 million to $80 million and used the $60 million to purchase GM stock. Chevrolet purchased General Motors. It didn't work the other way around. However, Louis Chevrolet desired to continue designing. In 1926, he and his brother Arthur formed a firm called Chevrolet 333 and began designing a light aircraft engine. The company came to an end when he had a falling out with his brother. Louis promptly established the Chevrolet Air Car Company in Indianapolis, but it was forced to close during the subsequent economic downturn. His final significant engineering coup was a 10-cylinder radial engine for which he submitted a patent application in 1932. But by the time the invention was eventually registered on February 19, 1935, Louis was too weak to rebuild the company. Instead, he worked as a mechanic, as he had done at the start of his professional career. His employer was the Chevrolet assembly facility in Detroit. Louis Chevrolet became ill and had a stroke in 1934. Charles, his 27-year-old son, died the same year. Alfred, his second son, resided in Detroit until 1971, when he died at the age of 59. Louis Chevrolet died on June 6, 1941, at the age of 63, in Lakewood, Michigan, east of Detroit. He left a legacy of millions of cars carrying his name. An American journalist once questioned him if he was famous because of the Chevrolet brand or the other way around. Chevrolet responded cheerfully, "It had a little of everything. But one thing is certain, I was the first to arrive." With the history of the company out of the way, let's take a look at the evolution of the Chevrolet logo. Whatever its origins, the Chevrolet bow tie is now a globally recognized visual signature. Several modest changes have been made to the design over the years to make it look more current. The Chevrolet logotype was also used for many years before being phased out in 1985. The insignia has gained and lost weight, and it has even been engulfed by other shapes. Here is the whole history and evolution of the Chevrolet logo since its debut in 1913. In 1911, Chevrolet launched its first design. The Chevy logo was inspired by co-founder Louis Chevrolet's signature. It was made by hand and had big, blacked-out letters. It was only used for a short time, from 1911 to 1914. In 1913, Chevy's first bowtie emblem was introduced. The renowned bowtie insignia was created in 1913, giving rise to the countless original stories we hear today. This was the beginning of iconic branding for one of the country's oldest automotive manufacturers. The first Chevy bowtie logo was understated, with white and light blue accents and a gold outline. Until 1934, the name Chevrolet appeared across the bowtie. In 1934, a monochrome design was introduced. Chevrolet ditched the light-colored palette in favor of a monochromatic design, with the word Chevrolet presented in a more modern typeface. The letters were larger, giving the insignia a more serious appearance than before. This version was in use until 1940. Chevy returned to color in 1940. Chevrolet decided to bring back the blue-gold combination, but this time with a flatter shape. The colors were more vibrant and exuded a more youthful mood. The gold outline was now thicker and only visible outside the cross. This variant was in service until 1957. In 1957, Chevrolet unveiled its most unusual bowtie. The 1957 Chevrolet bowtie model is one of the oddest designs in the automaker's history. To begin with, it was a giant red oval with a bowtie on the inside. The text was also red, with white accents on the inside of the emblem. There is no clear reason for this sudden adjustment, but some historians believe it was done to highlight Chevrolet's performance. This version was short-lived, as it was phased out in 1960. A minimalist Chevy bow tie is introduced in 1960. Chevrolet chose a monochrome style once more, resulting in the simplest bowtie logo yet. The emblem was composed of a narrower black outline with a wordmark printed in italics and finished in black. This version was in use for a long time, from 1960 to 1977. The Chevy bow tie received cosmetic upgrades in 1977. Chevy returned to blue, but this time the designers were inspired by the old logo and put a thin white outline inside the bowtie. The word Chevrolet was now smaller and put in the center of the emblem. In 1985, Chevy unified the bowtie into a single emblem. The bowtie logo hit a tipping point in 1985, when the original variant of the present logo we're all familiar with appeared. Also, it was the most important change that helped the logo become known around the world when its first TV ads came out. Chevrolet also dropped the Chevrolet wordmark on the inside, resulting in the world's first single symbol logo. This version of the logo was in use until the year 2000. The Chevy bow tie went 3D in 2000. Chevy chose red again in 2000, this time with a more modest design based on a single symbol. The old flat design was replaced by a 3D design finished in a reddish color. This is the modern minimalist version of the monochrome style of the 1960s. In 2004, Chevy bow tie introduced gold. Chevy began using gold in its bowtie symbol in 2004, a departure from the company's previous practice of adding bright and unusual elements to its emblem. The new design emphasized Chevrolet's status as one of the world's most recognized brands. Until 2011, this version was in use. In 2011, the Chevy modern bow tie of today was unveiled. Chevy updated the popular golden bowtie logo in 2011 by adding a bolder silver outline. The gold-filled section was likewise patterned, and the insignia was unveiled to commemorate Chevrolet's 100th anniversary. This is still the company's corporate logo today. Chevy has made some small changes to the logo that appears on all of its vehicles globally. Minor changes have frequently been made to suit the front grille or curved surface of automobiles. Today's Chevrolet insignia is a textured, classic golden bowtie with a smooth chrome frame. The textured gold looks like a set of headlights, and the elegant and strong silver frame around it makes it look even better. Chevrolet utilizes the Chevrolet wordmark beneath the bowtie on occasion. However, the emblem has grown so famous that it may be recognized even without knowing the brand's name. Chevy's logo is straightforward, clean, and easy to recognize. The Chevrolet logo is an amazing example of how even the most basic design can have a significant impact on a company's reputation. With each new version of the Chevy symbol, the company was able to get important information across about the cars they were trying to sell. Today, the Chevy logo is a globally recognized image. The gold and silver colors of the Chevrolet logo transmit elegance and class, while the vintage bowtie reminds buyers of the brand's history. Although the wordmark can appear alongside the Chevy insignia, the Chevrolet bowtie is more commonly seen standing alone. This is a great example of how a memorable logo can make a brand name unnecessary on a product. Whatever you think about the Chevy logo's meaning and where the design originated, it's tough to deny the effect this image has today. In conclusion, Chevrolet's portfolio in America includes famous performance vehicles like the Camaro and Corvette, dependable, long-lasting SUVs and pickups like the Suburban and Silverado, and award-winning crossovers and passenger cars like the Traverse, Equinox, and Malibu. Most new Chevrolet models include convenience, safety, and security systems like OnStar hands-free calling, stolen vehicle showdown, and automatic crash response, among others.